Hey guys, this is Dave with Audio In. Today we're going to be taking a look at two budget IEMs by TRN. The first is the MT4, which comes in at around $18, and then also the TA3, which comes in at $58. And this is going to be sort of a mini review of each IEM, so I'm only going to touch on the main sound points and then maybe do a couple of comparisons at the end. So this is what's included with the TA3. We have the IEMs, of course, and the cable is actually a modular style cable, and it comes with 3 interchangeable terminations, including a 3.5 single-ended, 4.4 and a 2.5 balanced termination. It also comes with a pretty nice assortment of tips. Unfortunately, it does not come with the case. The TA3 has a 3-driver configuration and consists of 1 balanced armature driver and then 2 dynamic drivers. As far as the design and construction, the shell is built quite well for this price range, and I think it's pretty nice looking. The shell itself is made from plastic, and I think the faceplate is metal. Now, as far as the cable, it's also quite nice for this price range, especially when you consider that it's, again, a modular cable and comes with switchable 3.5, 4.4, and 2.5 terminations. Now, as far as the specifications of the MT4, it has a dual dynamic driver configuration. And then as far as what's included with the MT4, we've got a 2-pin cable that has a 3.5-inch termination, a small assortment of tips, including 1 pair of tips that kind of remind me of the spring tips. However, again, they only include 1 pair of these, and I think they might be mediums. And while they look like they would be comfortable, unfortunately, they're too small for my ears, so I wasn't actually able to use them. The design of the MT4 is very simple, and like the TA3, the shell, I think, is a combination of plastic and metal. The quality of the cable is okay, and it's about what you would expect at this price as far as comfort and fit. Shape of the shell fit my ears pretty well, and I was able to get a good seal and a comfortable fit, again, using the included large tips. Okay, let's talk about the sound of the MT4 first. Now, unfortunately, I don't have the graphs for either of these, but I'll try my best to lay it out as clearly as possible for you. As far as the general sound signature of the TA3, it is what I would consider to be V-shaped. So you have recessed mids with elevated bass and treble. And as I've said before, I do like specific types of V-shaped tunings, and believe it or not, this one is now one of them. I actually think they did an exceptional job with the tuning of the MT4, and not just for the price. I think it's generally a good V-shaped IEM, which I totally did not expect. But to break it down a little further, starting with the bass, again, the bass levels are quite elevated, and while it does have good extension and sub-bass presence, for the most part, the emphasis is in the higher bass frequencies. And these, of course, being dynamic drivers, they do have quite a bit of dynamic slam and impact. However, because of the increased level of mid-bass presence, it does bleed into the mids, causing it to sound a little bit muddy and just lacks in mid-bass and lower mid texture and clarity. And that extra low mid and mid bass presence also does contribute to an overall warmer mid-range presentation. And because of the amount of that lower mid presence and the way the lower mids transition into the mid-range, that downward mid slope doesn't bottom out until you get to around 800 hertz. And that lack of clarity, unfortunately, in the lower mids carries through into the mids as well. But it's not too bad, again, when you consider the $18 price. The good news is that as you move into the treble, clarity starts to get restored. As a matter of fact, the treble detail of the MT4 is, again, better than what I would expect at this price. It also has good upper treble presence above 10K, so it has plenty of air and a fairly open treble presentation. It also has pretty good soundstage. I wouldn't call it wide, and maybe even below average, but imaging and layering are very good. And as far as comparisons, my two favorite ultra budget IEMs for quite some time now have been the Moondrop Quarks and also the Tangzhou Wan'er. And I know the MT4 is going for more of a fun tuning, and again, I do think this is a very well done V-shape IEM. However, generally, I'm drawn to IEMs that have more of a neutral style tuning. And the Tangzhou Wan'er comes much closer to my preference. And the Wan'er takes just a little more of a mature approach to its tuning and comes across to sounding a little more refined and natural, in my opinion, than the MT4. And it's still my top pick in the ultra budget price range. Now, as for the sound of the TA3, so like the MT4, the TA3 also has a V-shaped style tuning. However, the TA3 adds even more bass presence, and at the same time, it reduces the upper mids and treble. So while it has a very fun and engaging sound, it's not the most natural sounding, and it has a pretty substantial amount of coloration. And if you look a little closer, starting with the bass, what you'll see is an adequate amount of sub-bass presence, but with the focus being on the higher bass and mid-bass frequencies. So the TA3 has ample amounts of dynamics, punch, and impact. And of course, this having a dual dynamic driver setup, it's going to give you that nice, fun, visceral sensation. Now, the trade-off is in the lower mid clarity. And I talked about the MT4 lacking a little bit in mid-bass and lower mid texture and clarity. Well, this has the same issue, but even more so. So we're talking a substantial amount of mid-bass and lower mid presence that unfortunately bleeds into the mids, and it does affect the overall mid-range detail and clarity. But again, we know there's always a chance of having to sacrifice clarity for fun. And if you know that going in, it's usually not a big deal. And then as you move out of the mids into the treble, things start to open up and clear up a little bit. However, the upper mids and lower treble are a little more relaxed and laid back, resulting in some instruments and vocals sounding a little blunted and maybe lacking in energy. And that was actually most noticeable with female vocals. They just sounded a little overshadowed by everything else. Now, as for upper treble past 10K, there is really good treble presence, so it has a good amount of air and a fairly open presentation, which kind of segues us into the technicalities. So while the TA3 may be lacking in mid-range detail, it does have good treble detail. It also has an average width soundstage for an IEM. Instrument imaging and layering is also okay and about on par with other IEMs in this price range. So overall, its technicalities are just okay for this price. Now, as for comparisons, I would say I still prefer the Tantrum Ola bass over the TA3 because its mid-range is tuned better and it just sounds much more natural. So it doesn't have any of the issues with instruments and female vocals sounding veiled. But then we also have the TK-ZK Oranos, which is my absolute favorite IEM at the $50 price point. And the Oranos is also technically a V-shaped IEM, but it's a mild V-shape, and the tuning of the upper mids and treble of the Oranos is just done so well at this price point. As a matter of fact, I've had this for a while now, and I still haven't found anything in this price range that competes with it. It's no doubt one of, if not the most natural sounding IEM at this price range that I've ever heard. So to kind of summarize my time with the TA3 and MT4, I definitely enjoyed them both to one degree or another. And I do think that these are pretty good entries for the budget and ultra budget market. But the landscape, the budget landscape has changed so drastically over the last year, and there have been so many new, better entries that the TA3 and the MT4 are, again, they're just okay for the price. And the fact remains that the TK-ZK Oranos and the Tangzhou Wan'er still maintain their title as the budget king, in my opinion. Again, but these are good entries. They're just not the best I've heard at this price range. So that concludes my review of the TRN TA3 and MT4. Thanks so much for taking the time to watch. If you like my content, please take a second and hit that subscribe button. Also, if you would please like this video, please share this video. I hope you guys have an awesome day.